Hello everyone and welcome to another Cut Rate Commander Precon Upgrade Guide, the series where we take a look at Precon decks and bring them up to Cut Rate standards. My name is Grazzet and today we'll be looking at the Rebellion Rising Precon from Phyrexia All Will Be One and its face commander, Neyali Sun's Vanguard, which we'll be bringing up from its roughly $40 price point to an increased budget of $75 after upgrades. But before we continue, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe if you like this content and would like me to continue making more videos like this in the future. And if you're feeling particularly generous, please consider buying me a coffee at the link in the description to keep me caffeinated as I work on more of these builds. Also, be sure to stick around until the end of the video to see who won last week's poll and which commanders you'll be voting for an upcoming episode. So with that out of the way, let's start by taking a look at the commander and playstyle. Neyali Sun's Vanguard is a 3/3 human rebel that costs 2, a red and a white, and has the following abilities. Attacking tokens we control have double strike, and whenever one or more tokens we control attack a player, we exile the top card of our deck. During any turn we attack with a token, we may play those exiled cards. Breaking down her core stats, Neyali possesses a mid-weight CMC, a slightly below average stat block for her cost, and a pair of abilities that not only double our creature tokens' damage output, but turn them into repeatable sources of card advantage as well. Taking a quick look at her first ability, it serves as a simple but very effective way to empower any creature tokens we're able to create, allowing them to more easily survive combat since they'll be dealing their damage first, trading up more often in combat since they'll be dealing twice the damage to blockers, and chewing through our opponent's life totals at double the rate if left unblocked. But while this ability is certainly impressive, it's Neyali's second ability that's arguably more powerful, as she turns those same tokens she empowers into card advantage as they swing in, thereby shoring up the very common weakness found in many token decks, in which they commit to the board, get wiped, and are unable to rebuild due to lack of resources. And while yes, this card advantage is more like impulse draw than traditional draw, we're under no real-time restriction to play these cards as we don't lose access to them on subsequent turns so long as our tokens keep attacking, and, like Robber of the Rich, Neyali doesn't even need to be in play for us to cast them, as the effect becomes tied to the card when it's exiled and not to Neyali herself, more or less making this ability akin to having a second hand to play from that we only have access to when our tokens attack, with the added benefit of it having no hand size limit and having up to 3 cards added to it per turn so long as our tokens keep attacking, making it a very potent source of value especially when considering our colors. So, as we can see, Neyali's a commander that's all in on the token game plan, empowering them to do more damage in combat and generating additional resources as they swing in, so it should come as no surprise that we'll be taking this upgrade in a token-focused direction, aiming to flood the board with bodies and overwhelm our opponents with vast numbers of double-striking tokens, all while we generate more and more card advantage as we do so. Thankfully, the Precon already does an admirable job of providing us with the tools we need to do just that, giving us plenty of token generators that either continually produce token bodies or produce them en masse as needed, as well as anthems to work alongside our commander's double strike granting to make our tokens even deadlier. But as usual, there's always some room for improvement. As such, we'll be refining our token production with some more reliable token generators to get Neyali's draw online as soon as she comes down, improving the quality of our anthems to better empower our tokens and the creatures in the 99, and lastly, doing some quality of life changes to the build to help improve the deck's core stats, particularly its draw and targeted removal packages, which are a bit lacking out of the box to help improve consistency. So let's planeswalk to New Phyrexia and take a look at the other side of the conflict, the remnants of Mirrian's native population. Neyali is one such survivor, once a humble bird trainer, now a war-scarred Mirrian rebel fighting against the Phyrexian menace. Like so many other Mirrians, she lost everything to the Phyrexians, her home, her family, and even her world. Now, given a new chance at life by Othari, who had saved her life in the Mirrian wastes for protecting his egg, and wielding a pair of hex-gold falconer's gloves forged by his flames, Neyali commands a new flock of birds, no longer messengers, but instead deadly aerial assailants, armed with hex-gold beaks, wings, and talons that she leads in battle against the Phyrexians, and she will never stop fighting until Mirrian is free once more. So, now that we have a better understanding of the commander and playstyle, let's take a look at the cards we'll be keeping from the base build. Starting off with the creatures that we'll be keeping from the core build, we'll be primarily focusing on retaining the best token generating creatures that the build has to offer, as well as the most efficient lords and anthems to power up those tokens and make the double strike our commander grants them even deadlier. Beginning with our token generating creatures, we'll be holding on to Dragon Master Outcast, who admittedly does take a while to get online, but whose free evasive 5/5 with double strike every turn when it does so thanks to our commander is way too good to pass up. Loyal Apprentice and a Mirrian Angel, both of whom reliably generate small evasive tokens that can trigger Nylea's draw effect while bypassing most blockers as we build up our board. Legion War Boss and Siege Gang Commander, each of which provide us with goblin tokens to build up our board and have decent upside by either permanently powering up our smaller tokens, or by turning the goblins it or our other sources create into damage or burn. Silverwing Squadron, which not only creates 3 2/2 bodies with vigilance every time it swings in, but also grows bigger as our board does and is evasive to boot to really pile on the damage. And finally, Othari Sun's Glory, who serves as another reliable source of tokens that gets better and better the longer he sticks around, with the added bonus of being very easy to reanimate at flash speed thanks to our commander, ensuring that even if he's removed, he'll be back creating tokens for us in no time. Then moving on to our lords and AoE pump effects, we'll be keeping Prava of the Steel Legion, whose on-attack power and toughness boost to our tokens is great for keeping them alive as they swing in, and whose mana sink token creation can be used to build up our board if we have excess mana lying around. Adriana, Captain of the Guard, will be staying in, thanks to providing an AoE +3/+3 to our entire board as long as we're attacking all our opponents, which we should be doing anyway to get maximum value from our commander's impulse draw. Golden Knight Commander will be retaining its spot as well, potentially providing upwards of a double-digit stat boost to our entire board as we summon tokens en masse to enable game-ending alpha strikes in the right situations. And lastly, Harmonious Archon will remain in the build as not only a board-wide +1 or +2 stat bump for most of our creature base that comes in with free bodies, but also as a means to make our opponent's creatures exactly the same size as our own, enabling our double-striking creatures to always come out ahead when blocked, either by taking no damage while destroying singular blockers, or by 2-for-1ing our opponents if double blocked. And as our last creature holdover, Mentor of the Meek will be keeping its spot by being an excellent source of repeatable card advantage that passively generates us value as we create our tokens, making it the first of many such effects we'll have in the final build to keep our hands full as we flood the board with bodies. It's then on to our instant carryovers, in which we'll be mainly focusing on keeping the few but potent removal options that were included in the base build, as well as means to keep our board states intact against our opponent's attempts to destroy them. On the removal side of things, we'll be retaining both Path to Exile and Generous Gift, each of which are staple spot removal in our colors to help disrupt our opponent's plays at a very reasonable cost. And on the protection side of things, we'll be keeping hold of Boros Charm, Flawless Maneuver, and Clever Concealment, all of which protect our hard-earned board states from being blown out by our opponents, with the first's alternate modes providing some decent utility in the form of extra damage or removal if needed, and the latter two effectively being free to cast if we control our commander or enough untapped creatures respectively, allowing us to protect our board even if we're completely tapped out. And lastly, Call to Coppercoats closes out our held over instance, it being an excellent source of flash speed token creation that only gets better the more developed our opponent's boards are, usually creating an instant army for us as soon as it comes down even if our opponents only have a few creatures apiece, and only getting better from there. We'll then be staying on the token generation game plan as we move into our sorcery holdovers, with Finale of Glory and Martial Coup both retaining their spots as very solid scalable sources of token creation that only get better the more mana we pump into them, the former eventually creating 4/4 evasive tokens, and the latter turning into a board wipe that leaves us with a token army in play after the dust settles. Then as our final token creating sorcery, we'll be keeping Increasing Devotion, which provides a decent number of tokens initially and we can later flash back from our bin to build up our board state even further to push for lethal, or to help us rebuild our board state after a wipe to recover. Then pivoting from token creation to removal and wipes, we'll be holding on to both Rip Apart and Collective Effort, both of which help us deal with front row and back row threats at a reasonable cost, with the latter also allowing us to use our spare tokens to get some extra removal from it and or power up our entire board. as well as Hour of Reckoning, which is a solid token-focused wipe that we can potentially cast for no mana thanks to Convoke allowing our creatures to help cast it, and since we have a decent number of means to protect our entire board from destruction, we can reasonably use it in conjunction with one of these effects to level our opponent's boards while leaving ours entirely untouched. And with our sorceries covered, it's time to move on to our kept enchantments, in which we'll again be aiming to keep as many token generators and ways to power up our tokens as possible. As such, Port of Grace will be retaining its spot as a solid source of passive evasive token creation that also works as a decent source of card advantage by making us the Monarch, along with the added benefit of upgrading the tokens it creates for us if we're able to hold on to the crown. Felidar Retreat will stay in as both a means to create tokens as we make our land drops in the early game, which is greatly facilitated by our commander's continual impulse draw, as well as a way to load up our entire board with +1/+1 counters once it's been established to allow our tokens and non-tokens to hit even harder, and Assemble the Legion makes the grade as well by providing an ever-growing stream of hasty bodies turn after turn that, while a bit slow to get going, can quickly get out of hand for our opponents as our commander and other power-increasing effects allow them to punch well above their weight. Speaking of increasing our tokens' power, we'll be capping off our retained enchantments with Intangible Virtue and Roar of Resistance, both of which provide solid keywords to all our tokens in the form of Vigilance and Haste respectively, as well as a solid AoE stat boost, with the latter not being limited to just tokens to enable our commander and the creatures in our 99 to benefit from it as well. Then proceeding to our held over artifacts, we'll be focusing primarily on keeping the best ramp and draw sources the base build has to offer to speed up our mana base and supplement our commander's draw. On the ramp side of things, we'll be holding on to the Mana Rocks Soul Ring, Arcane Signet, Boros Signet, Talisman of Conviction, Felwar Stone, and Mind Stone, all of which are cheap sources of mana acceleration to help us get to our commander as quickly as possible to begin benefiting from the draw she provides, and then, once Neyali's in play, we can use that mana to help us cast the spell she exiles as well. Then pivoting to our card advantage granting artifacts, we'll be keeping both Staff of the Storyteller and Idol of Oblivion, each of which fit nicely into our token creation game plan by allowing us to draw cards as we create them while also being capable of creating tokens themselves, either in the form of a small evasive token that we can use in the early game to easily enable our commander's draw, or a massive beatstick we can create in the late game to help us close out said games. And lastly, we'll be keeping Soul Guide Lantern as our final artifact holdover, which may not help our game plan directly, but is a nice silver bullet to have access to just in case we run into graveyard-focused builds, and, at worst, we can cheaply cantrip away to dig deeper into our deck for other resources. It's then on to the base build's lone planeswalker entry, Elspeth Tiril, who of course makes the cut by providing excellent token generation that progresses our main game plan, as well as a very solid amount of life gain to help stabilize our life totals on established board states, and a relatively easy to reach ultimate that will typically leave only our tokens in play while clearing the board of everything else apart from lands to help us retake control of otherwise out of control board states. And finally, reaching the land holdovers from the base build, we'll be keeping the Mana Lands Command Tower, Path of Ancestry, Fury Calm Snarl, Temple of Triumph, and Boros Garrison, all of which can tap for either of our colors to improve consistency, as well as Exotic Orchard, which should generally be able to tap for at least one of our colors off our opponent's lands. And as our last kept mana land, we'll of course be hanging on to Mirrian Landscape as one of the few forms of land-based ramp our colors have access to, with its same land limitation being more than tolerable for us since we're only in 2 colors. Then for utility lands, we'll be retaining Castle Ardenvale and Care Keep, both of which provide us with additional token generation from our land slot should we need it or have the mana to spare, Castle Embreth, which gives us another AoE way to power up our token's power to make the double strike our commander provides them with even deadlier, Slayer's Stronghold, which serves as a cheap repeatable combat trick to power up our tokens as they connect or are blocked, as well as a means to grant our bigger tokens Vigilance and Haste to allow them to swing in as soon as they come down and stay up to protect us from the crackback, and lastly Windbreast Heights, whose easy to meet hideaway condition essentially allows us to cast the most expensive card off our top 4 at the discount price of a single white mana, increasing our tempo considerably. And finally, we'll be keeping the 11 plains and 11 mountains from the base build as our basics to round out our mana base. That leaves us with a final tally of 74 cards, including basic lands we'll be keeping from the base build, leaving us with 26 cards to replace. So, now that we've covered all the cards that made the cut from the core build, let's move on to our upgrades. Beginning with our creature upgrades, which is the category we'll be adding the most new entries to, we'll be focusing on swapping out a good number of the base build's one-time token creation effects for more passive token creation that will net us more tokens over time, while also making some quality of life changes to improve the base build's somewhat lackluster core stat lineup. Starting off with a series of legendary token generating additions, we'll be cutting Midnight Haunting and Battle Screech, both of whose evasive token creation is admittedly nice to proc our commander's draw reliably, but sadly lose steam in the later game, for Krinko Mob Boss and Krinko Tin Street Kingpin, both of which are very powerful token generators that will flood our board with ever-growing waves of goblins as we swing in or tap them down respectively. The former benefiting greatly from our anthems and our other power-increasing effects to generate even more bodies, while the latter benefits from the other goblins in our build and our goblin token generating effects to create an exponentially growing number of goblins each turn. From there, we'll be axing Hate Mirage due to being a tad bit too dependent on our opponent's board with too little payoff in this build, and replacing it with Rakamar, who can cheaply and reliably create high power tokens for us as soon as she comes down to make great use out of our commander's double strike granting to pile on the damage. Removing White Sun Zenith, which is a decent instant speed source of tokens but is a bit too overcosted for its effect, to make room for Zirium Golden Wind, who hits the board at the same time as its predecessor would be able to create only a single token, and creates an exponentially growing number of evasive tokens turn after turn so long as he and the tokens he creates keep connecting, which is sped up considerably thanks to our commander's double strike granting. And lastly, we'll be scrapping Mere Battlesphere, whose token creation is very nice but forces us to choose between swinging in with them or using them for their intended purpose of powering up the Battlesphere itself, and giving its spot to Lena Selfless Champion, who can create just as many, if not more tokens when she ETBs if we have enough non-tokens in play, while also serving as another way to protect the majority of our board from wipes with her self-sacking AoE indestructibility granting. Then moving on to some non-legendary token generators, we'll be exchanging out Gold Warden's Gambit, whose token creation would be spectacular in a more equipment-focused build instead of ours, in favor of Keeper of the Accord, who serves as a source of passive token creation and ramp for us so long as we're behind on creatures or lands, the latter being very likely considering most of our mana acceleration will be coming from rocks since we're in Boros. Portaling Outburst's one-time token creation effect will be replaced with Sky Knight Vanguard, who hits the board faster and whose built-in evasion enables us to trigger its on-attack token creation safely and easily, and Heroic Reinforcement's mediocre token creation and one-time pump effect will be shelved to make room for Priest of the Blessed Graph, who again takes advantage of our color's very limited access to land-based ramp to passively deploy evasive tokens that can easily trigger our commander's draw at no mana cost. Then with our token creating creatures covered, we'll move on to make some adjustments to our card advantage sources, with the mediocre draw spell Cut a Deal and the more equipment-oriented Mask of Memory each being axed in favor of the more on-theme Welcoming Vampire and Rumor Gatherer, both of which take advantage of our high creature counts and token generation to passively draw us cards, potentially both on our and our opponent's turns via our instant speed token creation sources. In the same vein, Solemn Simulacrum's stable but generic ramp and value will be smelted down to make room for Commander Liara Portier, who melds seamlessly into our game plan as both another repeatable creature-focused source of impulse draw to work alongside our commander, as well as a source of ramp that can reduce the cost of all the spells she and our commander exile by up to -3 to make casting them even easier. And lastly, as our final creature upgrade, we'll be benching Jor-Kadeen the Purveiler, whose power boost is spectacular but a bit too unreliable in this build due to us lacking the critical mass of artifacts needed to bring it online consistently, and bringing in a Noblesse of War in his place, whose unconditional power boost is much more reliable and whose built-in evasion will allow it to crack in for at least 5 damage a turn alongside our tokens as well. So, with our new creatures covered, it's time to move on to our instant upgrades, in which we'll be trimming down some of the off-theme equipment in the base build to make room for more removal and utility. As such, we'll be scrapping Maul of the Skyclaves and Mace of the Valiant, which are both great equipment but would be better suited in a more equipment or Voltron-focused build rather than our own, and replacing them with Swords to Plowshares and Chaos Warp, both of which help bolster the base build's criminally low number of removal options with some powerful staple non-destruction removal in our colors. Similarly, we'll be shelving Loxodon Warhammer, which is again a very solid piece of equipment but just doesn't help our game plan at all, in favor of Grand Crescendo, which is much more on brand for our playstyle as another scalable source of token generation to help build up our board, and as an AoE source of protection to help keep our board state intact for longer. Then skipping over sorceries, since we have no new additions to that category, we'll move straight into our enchantment upgrades, in which again we'll be primarily focusing on tossing out more equipment to make room for additional core stat improvements and more token focused entries. That means we'll be cutting Kimba's banner, which would make a great addition if we were more focused on winning through commander damage instead of tokens, to add in Prosperous Partnership, which serves as an additional source of tokens as well as a way to turn our tokens into ramp to help fuel our game plan further, trading out Glimmer Lens, which honestly isn't too bad of a repeatable card advantage source but would be better suited if we were more leaning into extra combat to proc it more often, for Tokasia's Welcome, which is again another free passive source of draw that will proc every turn so long as we keep creating tokens, and Smelting Down Hexplate Wallbreaker, which is admittedly a powerful source of extra combat that I can see staying in the build to make room for Rabble Rousing, which edges out its predecessor as being both a very easy to proc source of repeatable token creation and a free spell off our top 5 that we can proc the turn it comes down before we attack. And as our final enchantment swap, the Token Lord Phantom General will be losing its spot on the roster, being a bit too niche and overcosted for what it does, being replaced by Glory of Warfare, which affects all our creatures, not just tokens, and whose power boost on our turn makes our double striking tokens as well as our other creatures hit that much harder, while the toughness boost on our opponent's turns allows our entire board to block that much more effectively. Artifact upgrades are then up next, in which we'll be replacing the much too artifact-focused land Buried Ruin and the mediocre rocks Volshok Factory and Commander Sphere with the faster ramp sources Wayfarer's Bauble, Fire Diamond, and Marble Diamond, all of which hit the board sooner and help us get to our commander and bigger spells that much faster, as well as cutting the indiscriminate board wipe chain reaction in favor of the more on-theme Halo Fountain, which serves as a repeatable source of token creation, card advantage, and, if the game goes long enough, an alternate win condition. And that's on top of working very well to untap bigger tokens and creatures after they swing in to protect us from the crackback, or to reset creatures that tap themselves to create tokens such as Krinko or Rakamar to let them do so again. Then moving on to our Planeswalker upgrades, our singular change will be raising the arguably bad land Temple of the False God to have Zariel Archduke of Avernus take its place, who provides us with another AoE power increase as well as haste for all our tokens to take advantage of to hit even harder and swing in as soon as they come down, additional token creation that doubles as removal as they're destroyed, and, should we get to it, an extra combat ult that helps us get our biggest token in for some extra damage each turn. And finally, reaching our land upgrades, our only change will be swapping out the random cycling lands Forgotten Cave and Secluded Steppe included in the base build and replacing them with Battlefield Forge and Clifftop Retreat, both of which provide better fixing and typically come into play untapped to help speed up our mana base. So, now that we've covered all 26 cards that we've upgraded from the core build, let's take a look at the breakdown for this Precon upgrade. This deck currently has 24 creatures including the commander, 9 instants, 6 sorceries, 9 enchantments, 13 artifacts, 2 planeswalkers, and 36 lands. Looking at the stats that matter to our game plan, we have a total of 34 sources of creature token creation, 27 cards that care about creatures, 8 cards that care about token creatures, 12 cards that increase our creature's power, and 5 sources of AoE protection, giving us plenty of token generation to both fuel our commander's draw and be empowered by her, plenty of cards that interact with both our token and non-token creatures to take advantage of our huge board states, a decent number of ways to increase our token's power to make the double strike our commander grants them even deadlier, and a handful of ways to keep our hard-earned board states from being leveled by our opponents. For general deck stats, we have 14 ramp sources, 10 card draw sources, 9 targeted removal sources, and 3 board wipes. Our targeted removal being slightly lower than normal due to us being more concerned about keeping our board state intact over disrupting our opponents, but still being significantly improved over what was in the base build, and all our other stats falling within more typical ratios. Looking at our mana curve, we have 6 1-drops, 18 2-drops, 15 3-drops, 12 4-drops, 9 5-drops, 3 6-drops, and 1 7-drop, leaving us with a lighter mid-weight curve that aims to get a decent number of tokens on board in the early game, followed by our commander to begin generating card advantage and empowering said tokens, and finally using the value she generates for us to get even more tokens and ways to empower them into play until we overwhelm our opponents in a sea of empowered bodies. The final price of this build then comes out to be $75.09 after upgrades. This price does not include tax or shipping and assumes that the price you paid for the precon was $40. The price of the cards was calculated by using the cheapest listed marketplace price on TCG Player at the time of this recording. For side grades, if we're looking to add some more finishers to the build, we can exchange out Golden Knight Commander for Audric Master Tactician to allow us to make devastating alpha strikes with our creatures that our opponents won't be able to block, and or replace Zirium Golden Wind in favor of Audric Lunarch Marshal, who is another great alpha strike enabler thanks to being able to spread the double strike our commander grants to our non-token creatures, in addition to common keywords in our deck such as flying and haste to our entire board as well. Then for upgrades, Rumor Gatherer can be swapped out for Professional Facebreaker, who still provides card advantage in addition to ramp in the form of treasure generation that fits well with our creature-heavy attack-focused playstyle. Noblesse of War can be benched to make room for Cathar's Crusade, which can repeatedly and permanently increase our entire board stats as we create new tokens. Priest of the Blessed Graph can be exchanged out for Adeline Resplendent Cathar, who can reliably deploy 3 tokens a turn and whose power scales with our board state. Idol of Oblivion can be replaced with Benny Brack's Zoologist, who's essentially free to cast on a wide enough board state and can draw us a card every turn so long as we continue to create tokens. Lena Selfless Champion can be cut in favor of Ancient Gold Dragon, who just needs to connect once to completely flood the board with evasive tokens and take over the game, and Rakamar can be let go so we can grant her spot to Battle Angels of Tyr, whose combination of Myriad and on-damage draw, ramp, and life gain are absolutely insane in this build when combined with our commander's double strike granting. And finally, we can replace Zariel, Archduke of Avernus, and Soul Guide Lantern for the token multiplying Anointed Procession and Mondrak Glory Dominus, both of which will double our token production to allow us to flood the board with even more bodies, while also thematically doubling the price of the base deck and upgrades if we decide to include them. Thanks everyone for sticking around until the end of the video. Before we continue, I'd first like to thank the channel subscribers yet again for helping us crack the 9.4K and 9.5K subscriber milestones. We're nearly at 10K thanks to all of your support, so thank you for helping the channel grow. Now taking a look at the results of last week's poll, it looks like Skrelv Defectormite was able to claim the top spot, so look forward to a Poisonous Protection build featuring him soon. Then moving on to this week's poll, we have a new batch of contenders with escalating color identities vying for your votes, those being the colorless Graz Unstoppable Juggernaut, the mono-colored Kemba Ka Enduring, and the dual-colored Glissa Sunslayer. Please cast your vote in the Community tab, link in the description, and let me know in the comments who you voted for and what commanders you want to see from Phyrexia All Will be won in future polls. And lastly, before we close out, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe if you haven't done so already, as this channel can't grow without your support. And if you feel like showing your thanks by keeping me caffeinated while I make these videos, please consider buying me a coffee at the link in the description. And speaking of which, I'd like to thank David Embler for their generous donation. Thanks for the coffee, David, and thank you for supporting the channel. And if any of you would like to support the channel in a different way, feel free to check out the other deck techs floating around my head if you'd like to see the latest builds, or click on the link above for a playlist of all the Cut Rate Commander episodes I've made so far. And with that, have a good one folks, and stay safe.